However, sometimes I think the what gets lost is whether or not some of these things are actually practical in the real world. Like telling a new mom, like, hey, can you just sit down for, 20 minutes and be mindful and calm and sit here at the table? For a lot of people, it's just not a practical way.
How are you, beautiful?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Miss? I'm in prep mode.
I'm struggling. Although I have been really, really excited because all of this is like so new
Yeah.
to me, and it's just I am always busy thinking about what I'm gonna be training tomorrow. I need to work on posing. Like there's a lot of things that it just keeps me going and gets me excited. The diet is part of it, obviously, and I'm hungry, but I've taken this week a little bit more gentle.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for my period to come. It doesn't come. It's sort of like that. You know that there are certain, I don't know, some physiologies may respond much earlier to an energy deficit.
Yeah.
And I don't know, since I started my deficit probably 2 months ago, my period started just playing out.
Yeah.
Like it's now always getting delayed. It used to be on point. And now it's like, oh, well, I'm just gonna wait until it comes, and then we'll see. My appetite will regulate. And I'll be on point again.
Yay!
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember my period would just like even with stress, if I pulled an all-nighter, it was all over the place in medical school with studying and whatnot. And I just decided, you know what, I am going to get the Mirena, and because I didn't want kids at the time, and then I just stayed in there. So yeah, so can't worry about your period if you don't have if you are chemically preventing yourself from having one.
I know, I know. Well, one question we had from the very beginning is, where have you been all this time?
What are you
Because
talking about?
obviously,
What do you mean? What do you
because
mean?
we did, obviously we'd had our conversation a few months ago, and I got that out. But a lot of people are saying, why she haven't come to the public
Oh,
just so for
now.
so long? Like you're now kind of like coming out and having more of that social media presence. So I think a lot of people want to know what was in Crystal's life before, and now she's kind of ready to go.
The medical training, that's the last 10 years. I met Mike when I was a second year med student, and I was just trying to stay afloat. I was just trying to keep people alive. I was trying to do my best. When I would get home from the hospital, I would immediately go to my laptop and start studying. And then when my residency happened, family medicine residency, I wanted to know everything about every patient I had on my panel. So anytime I would come into clinic, I would know everything, the ins and outs, who their family members are, like what their voicemail inbox sounds like, what the problems are, so I can, try and structure out my day so that whatever my patients needed from me, I could give them the most and also be sort of time efficient, which I think is probably the hardest part about like learning how to be a doctor. Like you can read all the stuff in the books and whatnot, but when they throw you out there into the world and you are expected to see 20 plus people in a day and expected to do everything in like these 15-minute visits, it's a whole lot of time management that you're not really prepared for until the fire is lit under you and you're like, here you go, here, see all these people and figure it out yourself. So I really wanted to make sure like this is my chance to learn and make mistakes with having, seniors kind of, supervise me. So I really relished that time and, took advantage of every opportunity. And so I'd post, I have my, people can scroll back on my Instagram. I was around in 2014, 2015, just posting video, like my training videos. So I've been around. I just haven't been very vocal because I really, wanted to learn about medicine, but also with my own struggles about weight and diet and training, I was still learning and I was still trying to process the the messages and the things that I learned from different coaches that I've worked with, nutritionists that I've worked with personally, and just to kind of figure out where I sort of fit in, because I always felt sort of like an outsider, even though yes, I am married to Mike. Yes, now I sort of work for RP, but I was just figuring out where my niche is.
That's amazing. And I have you really, really, I don't know, into a place where I know that there's a lot of things that you have gone through,
Yeah.
and you had your own experience, your own challenges with your relationship with food, with body, managing hunger. Like there was a lot of things that I think sometimes we need to have this personal journey before we're sort of ready to do something else that exposes even more to the public.
Yeah.
But now, girl, I have a rapid Q&A, potential questions for you, a rapid overrated, underrated. So are you ready?
Oh boy, let's do it.
Okay. So this is the game. This is how it goes. I'm going to make a statement and I'll ask you whether it's over underrated. You let me know what your answer is, and then you sort of give me a bit of a rationale why you think that is the case.
Okay. All right.
Right. Let's do the first question. So what do you think that weight loss medications are overrated or underrated?
Hard, underrated, and I am going to throw that out there. And obviously, we just talked about brought up my personal experiences with I am on a GLP-1 agonist medication right now. I am on semaglutide for weight loss and weight management. So the reason why I think it's underrated, particularly for within the fitness space, is I think there's a lot of people who are reasonably very cautious to recommend these or endorse them, and I think that's great. I think the problem is that there's a lot of, with the social media, there's a lot of fear mongering. A lot of people are very concerned, but it comes more of like, you shouldn't use these are going to cause cancer, these are going to, we shouldn't do these for anybody else. And so I want people to be very cautious and be very careful about them, but I don't want people to, I want people to actually dig into the literature and really think about what are the pros and cons, because these medications, at least the GLP-1 agonists, have been around for 20 years thus far, 19 to 20 years. So they have worked very well in the diabetic population. And as far as safety goes, I think the safety profile is very much favorable, that I think that we should be, be cautious, but also not to be, completely scared and turned off, that we can't have a rational discussion about the pros and cons of whether or not each person individually should be allowed or, reasonable to use this drug. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. Do you feel like there's more pros and cons when we think about the side effects that it can have, and what happens long term? Like, if the person gets off the medication, is there a risk for them to regaining the weight back?
There is a risk for them to regain the weight back, because now you are, whatever hunger signaling that you were blunting from that medication can potentially go away. However, it is not a 100% guarantee that you are going to gain that weight back. There are some people who only gain some of the weight back. The other big thing that I do see people afraid of is this idea that they're going to lose muscle. And I would like to point out that in all the studies leading up to, all the studies have not, if you take a look at the literature, they have not, their idea of what promoting exercise is encouraging walking, encouraging the 150 minutes of exercise a week as their kind of counseling. So none of these studies have actually really taken a look about, what about resistance training? What about lifting heavy weights and really preserving that, muscle and, building up that bone density? And then as far as the diet goes, they talk about calories, but they don't really talk about macros. They don't really talk about macronutrients. They talk about like putting a 500 kilocalorie deficit. what the hell does that mean? That's not, and I understand that if you are dealing with studies that involve tens of thousands of patients, it's a little hard to, manage that. I totally 100% get that. But on the other hand, the things that people are very scared of, Ozempic butt or whatnot, I would say that you can really mitigate and actually deal with those by having a higher protein diet, emphasizing your protein intake, and also doing resistance training on a consistent basis.
I do believe that that would be the case, and I'm hoping some research comes out and trying to investigate those variables.
Because those are the two big things. Those are the main things that people are really, I see in the kind of online fitness, concerns, which are very valid concerns. I totally 100%, can see that as a potential concern.
I agree. Now, I actually heard recently that there's like women with PCOS and some women with infertility, they now are getting pregnant because of the Ozempic. That's interesting.
I wonder if the ability for the increased or the improved insulin sensitivity and also the ability to lose some weight, because I know weight is also very difficult, particularly for PCOS patients, to and the higher risk for metabolic syndrome. I wonder if them being able to if there was a correlation between weight loss and then the improved fertility.
Yeah, these are some news that I heard here in Australia. I am not sure. I think we need to dig deeper in that, but it's interesting to hear that potentially from the area of PCOS and utilizing and improving the fertility through this medication as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's move to the next one.
All right.
Second question: mindful eating. Do you think is this overrated or underrated?
I'm gonna say overrated, and here's why. One, every time I hear about mindful eating, I get a little bit of a slight difference in what that actually means. And I don't know about you, but I've tried to look up to see if there's an actual, this is the definition of mindful eating. There's a lot of overlap between ideas of what people think mindful eating is. I think it's a great tool. However, sometimes I think what gets lost is whether or not some of these things are actually practical in the real world. Like telling a new mom, hey, can you just sit down for, 20 minutes and be mindful and calm and sit here at the table? For a lot of people, it's just not a practical way to, some of the suggestions are great, but a lot of them may not be practical for that situation and for what their lifestyle is like. I can't, I think, and I also will say I saw a lot of that in the last 10 years of medical training about, mindful eating. And every single time I would scroll on social media, I would just like to just start laughing and be like, hey, you want to hold my pager for the 24 hours in the hospital? I would love for you to see how I can incorporate mindful eating here, because I'm really stuck. My pager's blowing up. I have 7 admits in the ER. Yeah, I'm lost. So that said, I think there is, just because it's not going to work for myself, or it didn't work for myself, 10 years ago, doesn't mean it's not going to work for me now. And doesn't mean that all of the mindful eating suggestions is full stop, not going to work for me. I think there's something to be said about chewing thoroughly and putting the fork down, really thinking about hey, am I hungry right now, or am I having a craving? I think being in tune with that is always, it's always good to have. I just don't know. I question whether or not sometimes it is useful, in terms of people's lives.
I really like that answer, because I agree with you. It's a little bit impractical if you actually follow this exact protocol of what mindfulness would look like, and you have to set your environment and try to be calm and really try to have your own time to take deep breaths and look at your food and smell it and taste it and have it 5 minutes in your mouth while you chew the first bite. So it kind of makes sense to not really align with a lot of people's busyness. I do like the idea, or like I adapt this concept to being intentional with your food. So like you said, you're chewing it, you know exactly what you're eating. You're asking yourself, do I really want to eat this? Am I hungry honestly? Or is it something else that could be impacting my intention or my drive to eat?
Yeah.
So just asking a few questions that can actually make a bigger impact in whether you eat or you don't eat, and what you choose to eat or what you don't choose to eat. So it's more like intentional eating. I like more that word, because it's more like I am doing this because it's my choice. And obviously at the end of the day, it's not just about being mindful, it's about really connecting with what you are doing and why you're doing it in the first place. So I think that kind of like adjustment in the term would make more sense. What do you think?
I totally agree. I think also just that also definitely, I think the other thing that worked very well is actually making my own food and bringing my own food from home to other places, especially, in places where I know that my coworkers are cooking stuff, they're bringing food, they're bringing treats in all the time. And, stop and think about it. Like, I brought this food from home, I paid for this with my own money. And yeah, I took the time out to make it. I'm going to eat it. And you know what? I'm tempted by a lot of treats. I don't know if I'm hungry, but I'm going to eat this food first because I made this and it's going to cost me money if I have to throw it away to eat something else. And then I'm going to decide whether or not I want that cupcake, from, the nursing staff. Like, and a lot of more often than not, it's, I have able to satisfy my craving by eating my own goddamn food, right? Like my own vegetables, like which I had to, take some time to prepare. So
I agree. Now let's move to the third question.
All right.
What do you think about deloads and rest days? Overall.
I think they are completely, apparently underrated. I thought this was like, of course, everybody does deloads, but I was not too long ago, I came across, some people who don't believe in deloads, don't believe in taking a break. And I was pretty confused about that at first. And so I guess my question is for people who never take a structured break or never take a day off is, are you actually training hard enough? Are you every week building up, making things a little bit more challenging for yourself? And to the point where you're like, I don't want to go to the gym. My lifts are starting to, like, I'm on the edge of suffering. Like, if I do this, if I try and push it next week, I am going to fail miserably, which has happened before. I have completely done that before. I've also felt what it's like to overtrain. So when I had started to ask people who had told me to my face that they don't believe in deloads or training, turns out they actually end up auto-regulating to a certain degree. They either get sick, because that's also a pretty common thing with overtraining. Your immune system gets whacked and you end up getting sick. So you have to take a deload by default, or they actually don't progress in their own training, whether it's the weight, whether it's the reps, whether it's the sets. And so that's kind of where I'm, at with that. If you are truly training and not like exercising, because I know that there's that nuanced difference. Some people go exercise, they, have fun at the gym. And there are people who train, who really want to like push it, have a structured plan, have a long-term plan and a short-term plan. For those people, I say deloads are absolutely underrated.
What would be the difference for some of those that are a bit confused? What is the difference between exercising and going to train? What's the difference?
So I am still stuck on I have a hard time differentiating between the two, because I still, to a certain degree, sort of feel like there's, knowing what it's like to never step foot in a gym and to be completely unhealthy and to smoke cigarettes. I still have that like burning memory of inside of like, I'm still new, even though I've been at this for what, like 15 years now ish. Wow, I feel old. So, I would say that training, you have a purpose, you have a very long term goal, and you are able to break up that long-term goal into shorter term goals, you are actually structuring your training to whatever it is you're trying to achieve. If you're going to the gym and like, hey, I'm gonna just, do my 30 minutes of cardio, and which is totally cool. I love the fact that people are going to the gym. Please do not get it twisted that I'm like, these guys are just beginners. Like, I don't want it to ever be like that at all. But I think there is this nuanced difference of like, I have this really, I have this big goal, and then I'm going to break it up into these smaller goals. And every part of my training has a purpose. And that purpose is to serve that one big overarching goal that I have. So versus exercise, like I go to the gym, I do my, I take a class, and it's fun and it's cool, and like I get a lot of out of it. But you ask people like, what are you training for? What are your goals? Sometimes it's a little bit more vague. So
Would you say,
I,
because maybe sometimes could be also part of like lack of guidance or
oh
education, because I see that so many people, especially beginners,
yeah,
would go to the gym. They have a big goal. They want to
oh
lose
yeah,
25 pounds.
oh
They
yeah,
they really want to do that, but they have no idea what progressive overload looks
oh
like, or what training actually is when it comes to doing a routine or a program that actually targets
mm-hmm,
certain muscles, allows to overload over time. Like that's what I would see the difference. Like
mm-hmm,
exercises, like there's no structure, there
yeah,
is no like a specific plan you follow,
yeah,
and therefore you may be underdoing or overdoing
oh
certain exercises, or getting more tired than you do,
oh yeah,
or not doing enough,
mm-hmm,
or probably not really targeting what you want to target efficiently,
oh yeah,
versus when you have a training program, you're training although you do have kind of like a purpose and an intention, you kind of follow a plan, you know why you're doing certain things, and you seek more of that structure
yeah,
that allows you to get there.
yeah. Yeah, and even so, the hard part is even in the beginning when I had structure, those beginner training like plant programs, like I spent weeks, months, maybe even a first couple of years trying to figure out, like I had no idea what my max is or what volume I could tolerate or what my one rep max is. And I don't even need to know that now because I'm not a power lifter, but yeah, just getting into the habit. And I actually I have a client who I trained with in live in person. Like I met her at the gym at 4:45 in the morning at Planet Fitness, and we got it done. But like it really, I would even say for her, yes, she's on a sort of structured training program, but it's still just get into the habit and get really familiar with learning the lifts. You have to learn, like if you're learning a new skill, like you're learning a new movement. It's I don't know if if you've like picked up any like new sport or like had to do any new exercises for training for wellness that you haven't really done in your previous kind of training or anything new. It's yeah, it's like I feel like an old dog learning some new tricks. Like even now with certain exercises, there are things that I'm still learning. So but really in the beginning it's just trying to get into the habit and trying to make lifting enjoyable enough that they stick with it. I think that's I always want to like sort of under promise and over deliver, and so if I can just very small things one at a time. Like I don't the last thing I would want to do is ever overwhelm somebody, especially a beginner, with like you got to train 6 days a week and you got to be hardcore, and oh god, well what a way to turn people off of that.
I agree so much. Now, another question for you is, do you altering programs around your menstrual cycle, is that over or underrated?
I would say I'm not overrated. So I was like, how do I say no? I'm not really interested in. So training off the menstrual cycle off the bat, I'm not sure. Like the literature does not really seem to support like the practical, there's one in theory, the, the kind of literature seems to support some idea of you being stronger at certain periods of your menstrual cycle, which I think in theory is cool. In practicality, the practicality of trying to do everything around your menstrual cycle and is, I think the practicality of it is just not all that there. And I'm not, and the literature does not, while there is some notes that you are stronger at certain periods, I don't think it's actually I'm not really quite sure how, whether or not I would actually program. I have not done anybody's training program around their menstrual cycle because I don't see the practicality of it. Also, the markers um, for I would also have to look at other markers of fatigue, systemic fatigue, performance. That to me seems to be more important than just like, I have my period every month at the end of the month, and like in theory I should be stronger on XYZ days. Like, let's figure out how to do, I'm not going to go backwards based off of that. So, things like, how's your sleep? How have your lifts been progressing? Are you actually, like, are you sick? Are you, you know, all those other things. And there have also been times where people feel like shit and go to the gym and end up doing pretty well. So how we feel sometimes doesn't correlate to how we're going to do in the gym.
I totally agree, especially now that I'm living the process with dieting and like the menstrual cycle and all of these things. Sometimes you feel like you kind of wonder when you're sort of like debating whether you go to the gym or not when you're feeling not that great. And you're like, look, I'm just going to show up. I may just do a bit less, just mentally, to not get overwhelmed. And you end up doing better and more, and the sessions are super amazing. And there's also the point that every woman is so different. So some women will respond accordingly to the symptoms of their menstrual cycle, and it will be a lot of pain, cramping, a lot of fatigue. But some of the women really have no problems. Like, they can have their worst day of bleeding, and that's the day where they have the best PRs. Like, to me, sometimes that's been the case. Like, I'll be in my second day where I'm sort of like bleeding out, literally. And I have the best PRs in the gym. Like, I have no idea, but like, it doesn't really make much sense when you think about it. But like, that's how your physiology, individual physiology is. It's so different. So I totally agree with you. It's overrated. Now, next question.
Okay. All right.
Intermittent fasting.
Oh, gosh.
Over or underrated?
Complete overrated. And this is me saying this. I think it's a pretty decent tool to consider, particularly for people who have really busy shift work, people like who don't have access to food, like a surgeon. I can't eat, and I can't have regular meals because I'm in the OR scrubbed up. Like, it sort of makes sense. I don't think there's anything magical about it. I think the thing that makes it overrated is people kind of tout it as like, I'm doing this like magical thing still, and like, this is the key for everything, when it's really just you found a really nice way to control your calories. And it sometimes when I see these discussions about intermittent fasting, they forget about the caloric deficit, and they pay so much attention to this like window, like, I got to do this window thing, and then my window of eating is just this and this, and it's like, it's actually just the calories, man. Like, you're managing to shovel a whole day's worth of food into like a 2-hour block. Like, yes, you can cut your eating block by an hour, and maybe you'll get yourself into enough of a caloric deficit to make it work. But let me tell you, as somebody who is one of the first painful things that I have kind of struggled with is, I have done those feeding windows and I didn't know anything about calories. And boy, did I make that, like, take advantage. Like, if my feeding window ended up getting cut in half, I would just eat double. I would just eat twice as much. It just, you missing the forest from the trees.
I totally agree. And the thing is, a lot of people, I don't know if you being in the medical field as well, you hear even doctors or like health professionals saying it's not just about weight loss, is it goes beyond the benefits of intermittent fasting, goes beyond that. It helps longevity, it
Oh God.
helps restore certain diseases. Like where does that fit in truly in the evidence?
Yeah, I haven't, thankfully, with the medical field, I haven't seen too many people start going down that rabbit hole because I have seen that like longevity kind of like just for the intermittent fasting alone. And I'm not very clear on the data of that versus being at a healthy weight is beneficial for longevity. So I haven't really teased out, I haven't, once I started to see that and I kind of just kind of put that away for a while. Oh.
All right, next one. Okay, if we were talking about intermittent fasting, what do you think about the ketogenic diets?
Oh, you know, I think being in the field that I'm in and being sort of in the kind of surrounded by sport performance professionals and recreational athletes, professional athletes, I'm definitely going to say overrated on this. I have seen too many athletes try to make ketogenic dieting work as a athlete. And to be fair, I always, I never want to like, as a physician, I never want to be like, hey, that sucks. Somebody's really interested in trying it, just like, hey, let's see how it goes for the next 2 weeks. Let's track your progress. Let's track your diet and let me know how it goes. And man, more often than not, 2 weeks later, I feel like crap. My lifts are in the toilet. I can't run as fast. Like I'm very sluggish. So for people who are really looking to, lift heavy weights, who are athletes, I think the fear over carbs is, sad one. And I think that, we shouldn't be, carbs are very important for performance overall and also just for cognition. So I think there are certain cases where it may be reasonable to think about utilizing a ketogenic diet. I know there's literature for seizures, epilepsy, particularly in kids. But, if somebody was to, give my best recommendation, I would say let's try and create that deficit by cutting out a little bit of everything, a little bit of carbs, a little bit of the fats, and then let's go from there.
I agree. Now, do you feel like, is there such thing as food addiction?
Well, they're in the general population or just, because I know obviously there's always going to be the genetic medical cases where that seems to be hyperphagia seems to definitely be more present than others.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if we can be a little bit more specific, or like if you're thinking about other types of, I don't think we're talking about Prader-Willi syndrome here.
No,
Yeah,
I would say just more like the majority of people that they say, well, I just have food addiction because they struggle to manage their appetite quantity or their foods, or when they start eating, they can't stop. But they have, let's say that there is no actual genetical predisposition for it.
I'm gonna say I think overrated, underrated is a hard choice to, I think.
Whatever you choose.
No, I don't think that I think the term food addiction is not the term that I would actually go with that. I think that I need to stop reading these. I keep looking down at the questions. So I think with people who say that they just have food addiction and they can't stop, I think that begs a bit more discussion on what do they actually mean by that? What do they actually, You know, is it because they're hungry? Is it because they're sad? Is it because they're bored? Is it because of, you know, I don't want to be in this body? You know, because of trauma that happened to me. I think that, yeah, I think the term food addiction is too general. I think that when people, the general public uses it, that's, you know, but I don't necessarily think I have a go to like algorithm or a very easy solution other than actually sitting down with the person and really trying to parse out what they mean by food addiction. Because I think it's real, but I'm not really sure if it's just like I'm is it like I'm physically, it's not like heroin where like if you detox off of it you're physically going to be ill and have all these symptoms. I think there's so many different components of what people mean when they talk about food addiction.
Yeah, I love
So
that answer. Yeah.
I guess it would be overrated, but I think it just needs more of a nuanced approach.
Yeah, I think we just need to dig a little bit deeper
Yeah.
for each person as to what they mean by that. And let's just understand what are the triggers or the causes for you to use food as your own coping mechanism or the escape from something that you're not wanting to confront or you're with a discomfort.
Right.
Let's move to another one.
All right.
So let's think about the eating more carbs
Yeah.
or more calories on rest days
Yeah.
over the on the rate.
I think it's underrated. I think it's a really great strategy. I haven't seen too many like kind of hot takes out there on social media that's just like, oh, this is so overrated. I personally have, you know, I've coached people who, and I've programmed higher kind of calorie days, to, you know, on the rest day or higher carbs on a training day or on a rest day. Because at the end of the day, you know, if you calculate out the week and make sure that your deficit or surplus or whatever is on point, then, you know, I think there's, you know, a couple different ways that you can skin a cat. So I think for a deficit, it becomes really nice, particularly if you don't have, you know, during the like, you know, during the week, like, I don't know, sometimes I would rather just have a little bit more carbs in a meal than have like, you know, 3 grains of rice for every, you know, like all spread out and just having one nice big bowl of something, you know, kind of nice and satisfying. So during a deficit, I tend to like certain days where I get to have a higher calorie or a higher carb day, like, you know, depending on how I splice it. So, and that doesn't mean like, you know, eating like, you know, junk food or eating a donut or something like that. I really am talking about, you know, making some, you know, a larger bowl of oatmeal or a larger bowl of rice or, you know, some French toast with diet bread. Like those are because I just don't want it to be like some sort of weird binge thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to eat junk food on, you know, I'm going to utilize these higher calorie days to eat, you know, shitty junk food. So,
Would you be someone who chooses more to eat higher calories and higher carbs on a rest day for you, or more so in training days where you're training harder? How do you see that distribution? Because, for example,
mm-hmm,
I may say that if you do have a high calorie, high carb
mm-hmm,
day on your rest day,
mm-hmm,
it's like a good timing when you're restoring your energy stores where you are like just recovering.
mm-hmm,
So when and
mm-hmm.
fueling, so when you train, you actually have the
Yeah,
fuel readily available in your body. But when you increase your carbs, the same, let's say, thinking about the same strategy, but on a training day,
yeah,
but you have been training on a consistent basis for a few days, it
yeah,
may be beneficial, but if you have had a rest day, it
mm-hmm.
probably will sort of potentiate even more performance. Or what's your stance on that?
Yeah. I could definitely see the kind of benefits. Like that rationale seems pretty reasonable to my knowledge. I guess I hadn't really given the higher calories like on a rest day a whole ton of thought, but also the other thing as you were talking, I was thinking about how during rest periods, how people's hunger can also be a little bit higher, and having to
Mhm.
deal with that, particularly while in a deficit, may be a little bit harder. So, in order to kind of help with diet adherence, putting the higher calories on a rest day, because sometimes during training, like sometimes I don't feel like eating, especially after leg day, like, you know, not really,
Yeah.
not, I get a little sick. So, yeah, I don't have a set like, oh, it has to be like this. I think it's always a discussion with how are you feeling today? How are you feeling on your rest days? How are you feeling on your training days? Can you eat all your food? How's your hunger been? How's your hunger been on rest days? Like those are the types of things that would, or how's your performance, especially as you move further into a diet. Those are going to be the thing kind of, strategies that, or the kind of information that I'm looking for in order to, figure out like, do I need to adjust stuff? But also, is it practical? That's the other thing with people, really busy people. It's like, oh, you're meal prepping. Now you've got like, you got to build this meal on for these days. You got to build this meal for these rest days. Like, is that practical for, for myself or the client? Because I'm on maintenance now, and I don't want a higher day. I want the same I want the same thing every day. I don't want to have to think about it. I, just, I'm chilling on my calories just, and I want the same thing all the way through, so I don't have to think about it. But
I
that's,
agree. All right. Well, I am really conscious of your
oh
time,
yeah,
so I'm going to ask you just one more
yeah,
question. And
yeah,
how is this is not over underrated, it's more how do you deal with clients that struggle with the scale?
yeah, yeah. It really talking to them about the kind of expectation, what makes them scared of the scale. Is it, my whole worth is the scale? Is it like, what in the past has really triggered you for, to give you this sort of impression of what the scale is? And I think it's important to work with them to make sure that like this is just a tool. And also the, yes, the scale doesn't define your worth. And also, and I think this is really important as we really try and help women get into, get more women in the general population into strength training, really trying to get them. I'm always all about under promising and over delivering. So I always want to paint like, here are the potential scenarios in which, problems that I've always seen women struggle with is, one, the scale is not going to be linear. It's always going to be this like wavy, up and down line. And really, it's going to be over time, in over the course of weeks, where you are, actually going to be able to map things out, and being able to kind of take somebody through that as their scale goes, kind of goes up and down, and actually showing them that is one. And also, when you start to introduce resistance training, especially into beginners, your idea of what the scale is going to tell you, and what your body composition is going to tell you, what your clothes are going to say, tell you, it's all going to be, it can be a huge mind fuck, sorry, for lack of a better word. And I think that was, for myself, the kind of biggest thing was, I've always sort of fluctuated between 140 pounds and 190 pounds over the last 15 years. And seeing my body kind of always look different at different points on the scale, because I had always built and done resistance training, and started to really emphasize hypertrophy training back in 2017 or 2018. And just really thinking like, yeah, I'm 144 pounds now, but like how I looked now compared to 15 years ago when I first did my very first diet. And Mike even told me, like, you just started really training and you're going to do your first cut. It's actually just, you don't have a lot of muscle right now, to be honest. And you're not going to look, you know, you're going to look a little like, eh. And he was right. It's not, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't a very, but it was true. So I think, and I'm working with this with a lot with my client now, where it's like, always checking in to see like, how are your clothes fitting? Did you go down a size? Have you taken any measurements? And even then, sometimes measurements can be a little bit tough. So I always go by, check your clothes fitting, take pictures. I always say take pictures. You do not have to send them to me. Keep them for yourself, because I know that, you know, a lot of people can be very sensitive about that. So whatever you do, take a picture of yourself, keep it in your phone, and then, you know, move on, you know, come back from it months from now. Because I think also a big regret that people do have is that they don't take those pictures and they don't look at themselves in the mirror. And also working on that as well. I think, yeah, a lot of people, you know, when you first start out, sometimes people aren't really like used to looking at themselves in the mirror and not saying anything positive about themselves. So I always try and give them some tools to work with, like, hey, and this was something that I read about long ago from somebody else's weight loss book, was like, look yourself in the mirror and say one nice thing about yourself. Could be anything, could be anything. I remember when I first started that, I was like, this is so dumb. This is the dumbest exercise ever. And the first thing for the first year that I started dieting, I was like, yeah, I have a nice smile. Like, and it just builds from there, right? Like, so I think I just went on a long tangent, but really, you know, looking at other things other than, you know, trying to figure out what exactly triggers them about the scale, really giving them some great information about how the scale can be a really great tool, and walking them through what, you know, kind of the expectations. And if they can't do it, then, you know, go buy other things, clothes, you know, progress pictures. So,
Yeah, I love that answer. And I would add that also like educating your client as to why the scale changes and
yes,
fluctuates, how your
yes,
body weight is always going to be subject to so many variables that
yeah,
sometimes, especially if the changes are overnight, you put on 2 pounds overnight, that is definitely not going to be fat or
yeah,
that you're doing something wrong with your diet. It's likely some water fluctuations that are
mm-hmm,
happening because of other things. You had a really bad night's sleep, or your menstrual cycle, you're
yep,
retaining a little bit more water, you had more carbohydrates last night, or you're the type of person who has a shift
mm-hmm,
and then you only have 2 meals a day and the
yeah,
last meal is at 11 p.m. And
yeah,
obviously, if you wake up in the morning and that is your first weigh-in,
yeah,
you're probably going to still have some of that food volume in your system,
right,
and that's going to carry on your true weight. But at the end of the day, is if you know that you're doing the right thing, you're putting in the work, you're showing up, you're sure that whatever you're following is the right program, the right strategy,
mm-hmm,
but the scale is maybe not saying all the time
yep,
what you're expecting to see. Just keep
yep,
showing up.
yes, yes, yeah, agreed.
Awesome. Well,
Oh,
I was super,
oh,
super happy to see you, and
yeah.
I couldn't be more grateful for you to be here. Where is there any sort of plans, any projects you have for the next few months?
Oh, yes. So I am sort of I'm helping out with the YouTube channel. So I'm helping to organize, project manage kind of that whole, you know, that whole department. So I think they've done a really fantastic job of building up that channel, just really trying to just get things organized, at least from the back end perspective. And then I am working on a bit of an educational platform. So some educational content, some kind of quizzes, Q&A kind of stuff. So I'm helping to build out that community. So working on those things pretty quickly in the next couple of months. So I'm excited about that.
Amazing resource. The YouTube channel from like Mike and RP is such a valuable tool, very educational, and it deserves all the followers and all the subscribers. So it definitely is amazing
Oh,
resource. Thank you so much, Crystal, for coming
thank
here
you.
today. And this is going to be here in my channel. If you want to collaborate, I
Yeah,
get you invited to do
of
that as
course.
well. And this is going to be put in my YouTube channel as well. It is a small, tiny one, but
Yeah.
it
And we got to get it
provides
started.
value.
You
Yep.
do. It does. And the most important thing is to get started and to be consistent, like just like anything else. So, Yes. So thank you so much for having me on here. I so appreciate it. I love catching up with you and love hearing. I can't wait to see how the rest of your journey pans out for you this year. Yes, you're gonna get it done. You're gonna get it done. You're gonna show up in those heels, and you're gonna get it done, and it's gonna be great.
I'm putting in the work.
Yes.
That's the only thing I can say. And I'm
Yes.
sure of every day.
Yes.
I'll see how that goes. But
Okay.
I just know that it it will eventually happen. So
Yes. Yes.
have a beautiful week and I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.